planks have no range of motion. They're isometric, right? We know the dynamic exercise, dynamic resistance training is far more productive than isometric, right? We know that full range of motion is more productive than partial range of motion, right? And isometric is even less than partial range of motion. They've done study after study that have demonstrated that you get less muscle growth with less range of motion or no range of motion, and you also get less strength increase because it only increases the strength in that one position. It doesn't increase the strength through the entire range of motion. All right, so here, hanging leg raises, it's important to know that the abs do not even connect to the legs. The legs are not being raised by the abs. Look at an anatomy chart. I show it to you in my book and in this course. What is lifting the legs is the hip flexors, primarily the psoas, and the psoas is conflicting with the participation of the abs. The psoas is trying to arch the spine, and the abs are trying to flex the spine. So hanging leg raise, any kind of leg raise, is not a good ab exercise. And you could say, well, I feel it. Well, yeah, you can feel anything that's isometric, but we know isometric tension is not going to produce the benefit. And by the way, there's no such thing as a lower ab. You cannot develop the lower ab, and there is no lower ab. And when people say, I want to work my lower abs, and I say, why? They go, because I have fat down there. Well, you can't spot reduce that area, and you also can't add ridges down there. The tendinous intersections that define our abs are there from birth. They're not going to change. They're going to be there for lifetime. You can't add tendinous intersections. So there's no reason why we should even attempt to work the lower abs. Okay, here we go. Bent over barbell row, another compound exercise, another basic, essential, foundational. It is not the ideal direction of resistance for the latissimus. It is not the ideal direction of anatomical movement for the upper inner back, the middle trapezius. It loads the lower back more than the upper back because the lower back has to hold the weight of the barbell and of your torso. That's the secondary resistance, right? Your upper back muscles don't have to lift the weight of your torso, but your lower back does, plus the weight of the barbell. So you're really loading up that lower back more than any other muscle you think you're working, and you're actually not even doing the right movement for that. It works the posterior deltoid more than it does the lats in the upper inner back, but it's not the best rear deltoid exercise either. It is a waste of time and a really dangerous one. Upright rows. Now you'll notice when you watch someone doing an upright row that the upper arm is doing a very, very similar thing that it's doing when you're doing a side raise, right? Whether you're doing this or whether you're doing this, the upper arm is doing the same thing. The difference is I've just bent my arm and I've internally rotated my humerus inside the shoulder socket. I'm therefore straining the infraspinatus to prevent it from going too far. I've used the secondary lever to double under the primary lever, thereby reducing the load, making me to use more weight, forcing me to use more weight to compensate for that reduction. You think you're loading your deltoids more because you're using more weight, but no, you'd be better off just using a longer arm and less weight. You're also overloading the infraspinatus, and this sideways wrist thing is not healthy for the wrist either. Again, not a good exercise. Overhead presses excessively externally rotates that humerus inside the shoulder joints, moves the side deltoid away from the alignment with the resistance, strains the infraspinatus, which is the muscle that keeps this forearm from falling forward, impinges the supraspinatus tendon. That's the muscle that comes up here. The tendon comes out from underneath the acromion process, and it gets pinched every time the upper arm goes up against the shoulder blade. And eventually that gets inflamed. Sometimes it ruptures. It also squeezes the bursa in there. That's impingement syndrome that often happens with overhead presses. The deltoids do not get loaded more than they would on regular lateral movements, provided the right direction of resistance is provided, which we talk about. Deadlift's another silly exercise, right? So if you look at a deadlift from the side, what is the joint that's moving? It's mostly the hip joint that's moving, right? What crosses the hip joint? The hip extension muscles, primarily the glutes, the adductors, and the hamstrings. But here's the thing, is that when you're bending over, the torso gets into that horizontal, fully active position, which means that the erector spinae, the muscles that run up along the spine, are fully loaded, right? They're weaker than the glutes, right? So it's fine if you're doing, let's say, a 100-pound deadlift and you're keeping your back perfectly arched. It's not the best glute exercise, but it's not going to hurt your back. But people want to set records and they want to have bragging rights, and so they'll go as heavy as they can. They want to see how heavy they can go for 1 rep or how heavy they can go for 3 reps. Guess which muscle gives out first? Erector spinae. What happens then? Instead of keeping your back arch, it starts to round. What happens then? Herniation of the disc, right? So you get a lot of spinal risk, herniation risk, compression when you're in the up position, downward compression on those intervertebral discs, and you're doing all of that. Why? For gluteus loading? Well, you can get more gluteus loading on that glute machine that I showed you without any risk to your erector spine, and you can work your erector spinae better, say more safely with another exercise, which we also explain. There are better exercises for all the muscles that a compound exercise can address. So we've got to get out of this thinking that old school is best, right? We need to break down anatomical motion and physics and neurology and understand what makes an exercise good, what makes an exercise compromised, and then choose wisely. What is this? This is an analogy on the left of a compound exercise and on the right of an isolation exercise. On the left, we see a bucket out in the rain. Yes, that bucket will fill, but look how much rain had to fall around it. Look how much wasted energy, wasted effort fell all around that bucket just so you could get enough to fill the bucket. Yes, people do build physiques using compound exercises, but it's like this bucket in the rain. It's a lot of energy, it's a lot of wasted effort falling around without being productive, without actually going into the bucket. On the right, that's an isolation exercise. It's precise. All of your effort is directed directly at the muscle you want to work. Nothing is wasted. It is the best way to eliminate systemic fatigue, improve your recovery between workouts, protect your joints, protect your spine, not get sick and tired of working out because you feel like you got hit by a truck every time you work out. This is the way we should train. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If they try to tell you otherwise, tell them what you just learned here today. That there's all these physics-related components and all these neurological components that play into whether or not an exercise is truly loading your muscle as much as you think it is.